looks fascinating. You've watched a few of these,
I've watched the first one. I'm so hooked.
We are joined now by our very own criminologist, David Wilson, and crime reporter Henry Lee, who starred in the series and joining us live from San Francisco. Thanks for joining us, Henry. We'll come to you in a second, but David, let's start with you. This is an astounding case. Can you give us a little bit of background for people that aren't familiar with it?
Sure, but first things first, Sean, I know this is your first week in the hot seat and you're smashing it. Well done.
Thank you so much. I'm normally quizzing you downstairs in the green room, aren't I? I love your chats.
And so this is a three-part documentary series, which is true crime. True crime often hides a variety of output from, you know, the sorts of true crime which are quite frivolous to something which is superior. And this is superior. It's about a couple, Aaron and Denise. Denise is going to be kidnapped from the bedroom that she's sharing with Aaron. Aaron is drugged. He wakes up. He reports the matter to the police. And then all kinds of events follow. Now, what's particularly good about the series is in the first episode, it concentrates on Aaron. And Aaron is going to go to the police station because he's reported his girlfriend has been kidnapped. The police instantaneously decide that he's a suspect. American detectives are trained in a particular technique called the read technique. The read technique, when they're interrogating people, is to create a confrontational atmosphere, to really focus and make it stressful for the person who's going to be interviewed. And here's the crucial thing, Dermot. American detectives can lie.
I read this, and it makes no sense to me how they're able to get away with this.
They can say, we have your DNA on the murder victim's body. We've got a witness, Shan, who can place you at the scene of the crime. None of which has to be true. They can lie. And there's a particular lie that's told in the first episode to poor Aaron when he's just taken the lie detector test.
I think by looking at that, how many miscarriages of justice there must be in the States? Because that's just disingenuously leading a suspect.
And the read technique very much has led to a number of false confessions and then, of course, miscarriages of justice. But once you decide that this person, that you are the culprit, then it creates what's called confirmation bias. The police begin to only accept evidence that supports their bias, you're guilty, and they ignore all the other information which might have demonstrated that, in fact, you were innocent.
That seems so unfair because, for example, he was in that sort of cell or whatever you call it, the waiting room, whatever, for 18 hours straight. You're tired, you're hungry, you're stressed. If you've got someone continually telling you you're lying, you're wrong, you did it, I can imagine by the end of the day you wouldn't know what you'd done.
And look how the police officer in that particular clip puts his hand on Aaron's shoulder, as if he's comforting him, as if he's trying to be his friend. But what we see here is confirmation bias. And again, we've got a good clip where one of the lawyers, who's in fact Denise's lawyer, Aaron's girlfriend, is going to talk about confirmation bias. One of the other things which is real life and stranger than fiction, stranger than anything we saw in Gone Girl, frankly, is that the perpetrator, spoiler alert, starts sending emails to wonderful Henry Lee, a reporter.
Yeah, we saw this, Henry, and I'd just love to know, first of all, what made them reach out to you in particular, do you think?
Well, I wake up very early in the morning. I was one of the first, probably the first reporter to post online a story about Denise's kidnapping. So I think that he latched on. I was at the San Francisco Chronicle newspaper at the time. He said, that's the newspaper of record. Let me use this poor guy as a conduit for communication.
Wow. I think there is a key moment in the documentary where it shows that moment where you're getting this email and you're sort of at the scene of the crime.
Henry, can I ask you, when you first started finding out about this case, do you think that you subconsciously had confirmation bias because of the information you were getting?
Well, traditionally, journalists, at least in the U.S., we are almost trained to say, well, if the police say something happened, then it must be true. Now, keep in mind, we've just confirmed that police here in the States can lie to suspects. So it goes to reason that perhaps sometimes they may not know what they're talking about. So this case has made very clear we must take anything that anyone tells us with a grain of salt.
Yeah, and you must have started getting suspicious when you handed over voice notes and emails that you were getting from, the potential perpetrator, and weren't the police almost ignoring you?
Right. They rarely tell the media anything about their ongoing investigations. When I first got what we call a proof of life audio file and then all these emails. I needed confirmation. I needed some kind of response from the police. They didn't give me anything because they were up to their ears in this very bizarre case with all these kinds of details that you could not believe.
It's so mad. And I suppose, like you say, if you're just going off what the police are telling you, taking it as read...
Why wouldn't you?
Then suddenly the media now plays a role in it, doesn't it? Because you're now spreading that same storyline.
That's right, because, you know, we are told, hey, if the police said this is true, then it must be true. And then we are, again, promulgating this to the public. And, of course, you know, who are we to be skeptical of the police? Because they are the ones who are putting bad guys in jail. They're the ones who bring cases to the prosecutor's office, and they must bring evidence in order to convict someone. So in this case, you know, we were on the road to believing that a kidnapping did not occur until things changed.
Henry, has this changed the way you go about your job and your role now? Like, how has this affected you?
Good question.
Yeah, that's a good question. I think we always, I mean, this is a one and done case. One would argue that all the things came together into this big case that may never, ever be replicated in my lifetime. But we do have to be very careful. Anything that anyone tells us, we must investigate. You must take a look. Step back and say, wait a minute, how do you know this, police? Get a second source, get a third source, talk to the defense attorneys, talk to witnesses to make sure that you can put a cohesive report that fills in any gaps in the record.
It's mad. David, do you ever think they'll change the way the American police do those interrogations? Because we've seen stuff like similar in Making a Murderer and other sort of true crime shows where before you know it, they've made their mind up before they've even done a real investigation.
Well, and in fact, you mentioned Making a Murderer and Brendan Darcy. His interview is very much the Reed technique and how it will lead to miscarriages of justice. No, I think the American criminal justice system feels that, by and large, it's getting it right in relation to these things. I was very interested in Dermot's question to you, Henry, because what I think the confirmation bias becomes bigger and bigger, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Once the public become involved and the public themselves become confirmationally biased in relation to the narrative that's being propagated by the media. We saw that in this country with the Nicola Bulley case. Yeah. And once that narrative starts, it's very difficult to change the narrative.
The responsibility is so grave, isn't it? For the media and the police.
It really is, and you can't put that genie back in the bottle. You can't stop people thinking, oh, I call it true crime brain. Oh, it must be the husband. Oh, that never happened. It must be Gone Girl. It's very, very clear that we are in a zeitgeist moment, and we have to accept that these programs have huge impacts on people's thinking. And I love this series primarily because it is educating people about the police's investigation, the misogyny, and it's holding a mirror up to what police investigations are like and the difficulties faced by women, especially if they're going to claim rape or kidnap.
Thank you. Henry, thank you so much for joining us. I don't imagine the hour is too hospitable in San Francisco right now, so we really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And thanks, David, as well.